Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of Raising the Bar Live, where we talk with CEOs about how they have raised the bar in their business and what that means and how you can leverage that experience. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today we have Devin Soni, who we have been affectionately calling the crypto gentleman. He does much more than that, but crypto is what interests me. So we're going to talk a little bit about that and how he moved from a very traditional finance background into a clearly less traditional space. So it is my pleasure to welcome you, Devin, to the show. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited.
I'm so glad. So I have to ask, you come from a very traditional academia. You went to UC Berkeley, you worked for Goldman Sachs, and to move into the starting with the crypto universe when it was a very young universe, and now back into something a little more traditional with Matador, your new venture. Tell us how you kind of evolved your thinking there.
Sure. Well, I think what I realized both in college and after, my first couple of years working in investment banking and things like that was, your learnings can plateau pretty quickly at a large institution. Things tend to move a little slower. They have a little more hierarchy. And, what I started realizing at places like at Goldman was, I was learning a ton. I was meeting lots of really smart people that had kind of built this career. But I think after the first year or so, I really realized that I was almost, educating more than I was being educated. And I didn't feel like I was at the point in my life where I was ready to, really slow down the quick pace of learning that I, had in college and learning things on my own. And you realize with, I was kind of growing up right around the time the internet sort of became popular. I still remember the dial-up modems and things like that. But I just remember being able to sort of dive into a topic and, spend hours and weeks and pouring into it. And I really love that side of the world more than I liked, a transactional work where you spend 2 weeks with a client, and you forget about them, you got to move over to the next one, and it's inch wide and a mile deep sort of thing. Like I really just felt that new spaces offered more ability to kind of become an expert, go deeper, pursuing my own passions, and that's kind of really where blockchain fell in.
Would you explain to this older person the difference between cryptocurrency and blockchain, because they are not the same thing?
No, absolutely. It's, a lot of people will use these things interchangeably, and, they're related. I was listening to the Frank Sinatra song this morning, "Love and Marriage," right? You can't separate them, but they're sort of, I think blockchain and crypto are really similar. Blockchain is a technology, and really think about it like a trustless database where if you put something out there, I've never met you before, but I still want to believe that it's true. Blockchain is sort of a database technology that facilitates that just trustless enterprise, trustless transactions. I don't need to trust you to work with you. I don't need to trust you to, kind of do business with you. That's kind of really the crux of blockchain.
Because there's basically a record of all transactions.
Right, exactly. Everything is recorded. Everything is public. I know exactly, exactly who did what, who, what made what decisions. It's all there. You can kind of go back and it's not true in most places, right? You look at banks or, businesses, and you see consolidated things. You don't see every transaction in the history of time, for a company or for something. And that's really what I find so interesting about it. And cryptocurrency is really sort of the fuel that powers the trustless economy, which means there needs to be an incentive for people to trust and be trusted. There needs to be, a means to transact, and what cryptocurrencies are sort of the byproduct of blockchain and the requirements that you have to really do business. So if you make it, if you do something good for a blockchain, there's not like a company on the other side paying you saying, "Hey, great job." It's really the blockchain itself incentivizing you to be a good actor, and that's done through cryptocurrency tokens like Bitcoin and Ethereum, which you may have seen or heard of.
Yes, I think those are pretty common.
Right.
Okay. Do you have an opinion about how AI is going to affect the adoption of blockchain?
Absolutely. I think, one of the really interesting parts of, sort of AI that's come up, in popular, just over the last several months and years has been that, you have this learning sentient kind of thing that's getting better every day that can often do things better than, kind of people can, but, certainly better than my kids, right? Like when you look at some of the things that are produced and the artwork and it's just amazing. And it's continually getting better. Those types of AI requires that what a lot of people don't see on the back end is it requires a tremendous amount of coordination of machines. You'd say that every query you ask, one of these AI things, every time you ask it to draw an image or come up with an answer, that can cost in the several tens of cents, which when you think about millions and billions of attachments really adds up. So, sure, we think it's free and people are sort of subsidizing it right now. But the great part about blockchain and, cryptocurrency is it's a way to incentivize people to, give up their machines to process these types of transactions in a way that's more efficient. It's also a way to keep AI honest, right? Because, we've all kind of watched the nefarious movies of kind of like the evil villain trying to subvert the economy and subvert the news media. And they always buy the newspapers and things like that, right? And I think the really great thing about blockchain is, again, because it's transparent, tying that to an AI, what you can really do is very transparently look at all the inputs and the outputs. Again, see that things are actually being done fairly.
So I read the other day, not long ago, a week or so ago, that the energy required for an AI inquiry, and this was specifically about ChatGPT, is about 7 times the energy required for a Google search.
Right.
So that to me says that the need for computing power will only increase. So we don't use human capital for that. We use computing power. So
right.
So power needs to increase, technology needs to increase. Yet you have pivoted back into some fairly traditional businesses. So you own a number of plumbing companies.
Right.
And you also now have a company that helps people buy gold.
Right.
These are wildly traditional things.
Sure. And, actually AI is a really big part of that, to be honest. Like I sort of, not kind of impressive, but I sort of, early in my career, I think I did a lot of things that I realized after time were not scalable, didn't have, tremendous longevity. And I think I spent a lot of time before starting, kind of this latest venture to say, what do I think is not going to change in the world over the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years? And, when you think about, big corporations like Google and Amazon that have, sort of taken over the world, and you think about this new looming, whether you call it a threat or opportunity of AI, which is going to, transform everything, I really want to spend a lot of time thinking about, what's not going to change. And, to me, the two things that weren't going to change. And I'll talk very briefly on kind of the plumbing companies, but, I really spent a lot of time. It's like we're probably tens of thousands of pages of like Bureau of Labor Statistics data and SBA data to think about, like what is the world going to look like? And really just felt like, no matter what happens, I don't think like AIs are going to come fix a toilet anytime soon. Maybe, but who knows? And even if they do, there's, this tremendous amount of red tape and licensing and unions and all this stuff involved. Like, I'm just like, I don't think that's going to change. Right. So if you're building a foundation on something, you kind of want to build a foundation on something stable and solid. And to me, that industry made a lot of sense. And similarly, but, kind of relatedly, but in a funny way, I think, gold is one of those things where, they're not making any more of it. And it's historically, survived over thousands of years as a pretty strong store of value during turbulent times. Things like, pandemics and wars and, shrinking economies, which can be a lot more personal to people here in the West. But, when you look at these types of things, it's like, okay, well, what's traditionally over the last, 1,000 years kind of been the safe haven here? And it's kind of been things like gold. But gold has kind of been, sort of the ugly stepchild of the investment world for the last, 10 or 20 years. We used to say when we launched this company, it's a company called Matador, where we make it easier for people to buy gold. We used to say, gold's the only thing that hasn't appreciated in the last 10 years, right? Everything else is up and doubled and tripled, and, housing prices and stocks and bonds and like all these things have gone up, and gold's kind of been sitting there just hanging out. And, when we look at the last year, gold's the only asset class that's actually appreciated against the dollar that's material. So it's, I guess that it's kind of coming to fruition, but, a lot of that is because, central banks and large institutions and family offices see the writing on the wall about inflation and what to do. But, a lot of this interest hasn't come from, retail investors, moms and pops, and, people investing their savings, which is part of the reason we started Matador, is really to say, let's make it, create an easier way for people to invest in the same thing that, the largest institutions in the world are buying today.
And how has Matador changed the equation for the everyday or like mom and pop investor? Because from what I've seen and our family has been investing in the stock market, and sometimes well and sometimes not well, and with this and that and the other, and different kinds of institutions. And it seems to me that if I don't have $1 million in assets, most financial advisors don't want to talk to me. And a lot of times that's not because they don't want to talk to me, it's because they're not even allowed to take an account that has less than $1 million in assets.
Right.
So if you're helping to democratize that, I think that's quite something.
Sure, absolutely. So, when you think about gold, there's a few ways to participate in the ecosystem. One is to buy, gold, ETFs, which are basically these securities that are supposed to represent gold. But when you actually start doing, kind of the research, you realize they don't actually own any gold. They own a bunch of derivative securities that are supposed to represent the price of gold, because that's easier to buy and frankly more profitable.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think we've seen over the last couple of years what can happen to derivative products, right? So that just didn't feel like a really safe way to think about it. Another way to think about it is, okay, well, I could go, buy a bunch of gold bars and put them under my mattress, which is probably pretty uncomfortable, or my home safe or something like that. Which, certainly a way to do it, but again, I think it just doesn't feel like the safe, prudent way to do things. So we wanted to basically create a really seamless way to do it. And for us, we've seen a lot of innovation on how, basically everyone uses their mobile phone for everything. And that even includes, buying stocks. There's, Robinhood that lets you buy your, Tesla stock or Apple stock in 3 clicks off your iPhone without any fees, and makes it really simple. And we just felt that, kind of gold didn't have that treatment of kind of being simple and modernized. It's kind of been left behind. So what we wanted to do is say, first, like, what's the safest place to store gold? And for us, it's always been, kind of these mints that sit at, like the US Mint and the Royal Mint in Canada and the Swiss, like these like giant vaults that have never been penetrated in, thousands of years kind of thing, right? And we're like, okay, well, let's store, gold there, because that's better than under your mattress, certainly. There's not an army protecting it, right? And and the other side of it is let's let people buy that gold, using their mobile phone with 2 or 3 clicks. Because if you're a consumer, to your point, you don't have a $1 million net worth or a bunch of zeros in your bank account, and you go to some place to buy gold, and it's like, okay, well, I see gold is $1,900 an ounce, and you're like, okay, well, I'm going to go click, check out my credit card information, they'll sell me some gold coins or something. And you realize that after all the fees and shipping costs and insurance, like, you end up paying like $2,400 an ounce, which means you've like lost money instantly, and you need things to appreciate by 5% to like make a even break even, which is not a great investment. So for us, we're trying to do this in a way that reduces costs, makes it easy and secure. Secure because the things are sitting in the vault, and easy because you can do it off of 2 clicks on your phone with the fewest fees possible. And that's really the thought process, is let people kind of put the power into their own hands to make decisions. Don't set them behind the 8 ball by charging a bunch of fees that make them lose money, and just really make it all transparent and seamless.
And who is your ideal customer here?
I think it's somebody that is long-term oriented, that just thinks that having a diversified portfolio makes a lot of sense. It's no one's saying, hey, put your entire paycheck in anything, because I think diversification is important. But if anyone that says, hey, I should put 2% of my income or your savings in gold, so that if the world kind of goes sideways or stocks are depreciating, that I have a safe haven here that you can help me pay for my mortgage or living costs. And it's someone that has a mobile phone, which is more or less everybody, and someone that doesn't want to deal with kind of the pain of gold storage and ownership, which again I think is a lot of people.
I would imagine that most people don't want to sleep on gold. As much as it might be nice to have, it's probably not very comfortable.
I haven't tried it, but maybe one day.
So where do you see this going where do you see Matador going in the next few years?
Absolutely. So I think in the very short term, our goal is to just really create, the most seamless gold buying and selling experience for people on day one. Over time, we want to add, this is kind of a blockchain word, which I'll call utility, which, I think Warren Buffett has a saying about gold, which is, the thing about gold that's not great is, you can't really do anything with it, right? You get a big pile of gold, you just sit on it, and you're like, I have a bunch of gold, like what do I do here? And I think what we'd like to do is be able to create real utility. And one thing that means for us is say, well, what if people can earn an income, like a slight income on their gold in the same way they can with the savings account, so that you're not just sitting here, with inflation, and you're actually earning a little bit of a yield. That's certainly something we're aiming for. International expansion. North America is our launch market, but there's a big world out there with lots of licensing and things like that. So we hope to build a really global brand here.
So gold is a pretty traditional commodity. I mean, it's always fallen into the commodity class or the commodity bucket of things. Would you be interested moving forward in adding other types of commodities, metals or?
Absolutely. I think what we built, which is kind of this streamlined platform. Certainly, silver is a fast follower here, but there's a lot of other materials that make a lot of sense that people may want to own, and people spend a lot of time talking about like things like lithium, which is such a big part of electric cars and solar, and copper, which is such a big part of electronics, and so there's lots of things that we can certainly do. And I think that's a big part of our pipeline as well. We want to get it right with gold and keep it simple, but over time, I think by the next year, we'll probably start adding new metals as well.
Would you ever consider moving into more traditional investing space, or you see yourself strictly in this more traditional commodity space?
If we see an opportunity, absolutely. I think a lot of great companies have done a lot of good things, streamlining stock ownership and things like that. So we would love to give the Matador treatment to new assets as they make sense.
So I know you're not quite in this venture alone. What was your favorite part of creating this entity? Because it's not your first entity that you've created.
No, absolutely. I think the funny thing about gold is people just, it's not part of the popular culture. It's not what people think about, right? If you think about starting a startup these days, you're like, well, I'm going to go launch an Uber for pets or something like that. And so it's this giant asset class, $180 billion are traded, and it's just not something that's been improved upon. So it feels like just a giant problem in plain sight that we have a lot of opportunities to work with. Which is what's been that, and then kind of getting the kind of team and gang back together. A lot of the partners who started this business with are people I've worked with for 10 or 15 years, people I've wanted to work with for a long time, but never had the right opportunity. And this is just a place where it just kind of congealed all at the right place at the right time.
So you've done some investing, some angel investing and things like that. What do you look for when looking at a business? When you're looking to invest in a business or purchase a business, what are the 2 or 3 most important factors?
Absolutely. I think the biggest one, and I'm gonna, I'm starting this, so the team is kind of moved because it's like, well, we are the team, so hopefully we're a good one. But strong unit economics is a really good one. Basically saying, is this business one that gives you a lot of, kind of gross margin?
Mhm.
Meaning, is there a lot of, money at the end of the basic transaction to, spend on marketing and growth and things like that, right? Selling, exit the grocery store, or delivering, like meals and things like that can be really, really tricky. It's obviously there's a great need and people use it every day, but the margins are terrible. Whereas, for us, being a very asset light platform that can scale globally with very few people, that just means that every dollar that comes in can be used for improving the business, which is something that we really like. I'd say that's the first one. Um, yeah, the second one is really just strong tailwinds overall, like being in a big market. Being in something or at least something that has the potential to be a big market. I'm sure selling yellow beach towels is a good market for some people, but it's not going to make anyone rich. It's not going to attract the right types of people that you want into your business. And it goes back to human talent. I'd never start a company or get into a venture without a really strong set of partners that had really deep subject expertise. And just having a large giant market allows you to attract the best people, because great people love working on big important things. So those three are kind of the biggest.
How do you feel? So in my space, in the health insurance space, one of the things that I notice is there's a lot of venture capital and private equity entering the space. And I have on more than one occasions expressed some displeasure at this, because I think that venture capital and private equity can do some absolutely fabulous things, but I always see initial cuts to frontline staff and taking care of the humans. And we don't sell widgets, and we interact with humans a lot. How do you manage that when you acquire a business that you are still, are you looking mainly at more commodity or impersonal type businesses, or do you dip your toe into the space where they're more service oriented towards humans?
Well, I'll comment more on sort of the legacy, kind of plumbing and HVAC and types of companies we bought. And it's a really great question. And we've actually at that company established ourselves as, a buyer of choice, which is really, really important, because for every company for sale that's a strong company, there's a lot of people that want to buy it. And many of those people are private equity firms. And I think their business model, like you said, there's a lot of, value in what they do, because they can take, kind of, struggling companies and kind of turn them around and make sure that saves
Absolutely.
jobs and things like that. But at the same time, their playbook is what's the most we can get out of every resource? How can we get the same people to do more? To do more? How can we like pay back our investors as quickly as possible so that we can
Absolutely.
go buy the next business? And I think that when we've thought about it, we've despite me having, kind of a private equity background, frankly, like the approach that I've tried to take has been a little bit more long-term oriented. And, private equity funds have a set life, right? They're 7 or 10 years, and they need to go make a bunch of investments and sell those investments and give the money back with return. And that's how you survive. Whereas, people's lives and careers are a lot longer than 5 or 7 years. And again, going back to saying, hey, I want to own a stable foundation. The stable foundation of these companies are people and relationships. So the
Yep.
more you can kind of, for us, the more we can invest in those upfront. So one of the things that we've done, speaking of insurance, is almost every company we've bought has been, sort of a mom and pop company, which doesn't think too much about insurance and benefits other than providing the bare minimum that's like
Right.
statutory required. Whereas we have a little bit more clout and negotiating power to get better deals for people and get better just coverage. And we do that almost every business we buy. Is we're going to improve the health insurance. We're going to offer vision and
Benefits.
dental, even though it's not required. We're going to offer 401k and college matching plan. And what you realize real quickly is that those types of things improve people's lives tremendously, and they create loyalty. And you realize how much it costs when you actually lose an employee. And when you actually save someone that was, going to be at the door, you save all that knowledge. And for us, our retention's been amazing. Our ability to hire has been amazing. even from, other PE firms or from PE firms and things like that, because I think we've taken this long-term view of, every resource here is someone we want to keep around for life.
Yeah, and I think that's really important. I interviewed a gentleman some time ago who is the third generation operator of his family owned business, and 40% of his staff of several hundred people had been with them for more than 20 years. And I think that's a remarkable testament to a well-run organization. I mean, the parent so-and-so worked there, the kids work there, they've got a couple of grandkids. I think it's remarkable when you can create an environment like that. And I see those businesses be so successful and so profitable.
No, I mean, you look at the layoffs these days, right? And it's like people, tens of thousands of people getting laid off with an email. It's tough. And again, you understand the realities, but I think, like you said, having an asset that you can build of people and trust and, a community just makes so much sense.
Yes. And so will you keep growing the plumbing businesses? You'll keep acquiring them?
We are, we try to acquire one a month or so. It's grown pretty quickly. And I think, again, we just kind of found that right positioning. One of my coworkers was saying, it took a long time, but now we start getting, calls from people that are retiring saying, hey, would you want to take ours over? And it feels like we're sort of gone from, trying to find our market and find everything to work to, kind of sit, for use a basketball analogy, we're just kind of sitting under the hoop catching rebounds because, we've established ourselves in a good position.
So you acquire them nationwide?
Yes, mostly in the southern US, southwest and southeast, where there's a little more population growth, which just means that, it's easier to pick up new customers when, new people are moving to town all the time.
How much time do you invest in marketing? One of the things that I notice among our clients is some of the smaller clients, they don't necessarily understand the difference between marketing and sales. And I think that as somebody that owns a number of companies in the same industry, you can bring some economies of scale to that.
The best thing we ever did actually was buy a marketing agency that specialized in the trades. And what we realized is when you have a family-run business or a business that someone's owned for a long time, it's really easy to get complacent. And actually, the other side of it is, a lot of people that started these types of companies in the, the 80s and 90s sat through several housing booms and are very, financially independent, and they've done well for themselves. They don't feel the need to grow significantly. They can just kind of keep the people they like around, do the work they want, and afford their second house and vacations, and they bought some real estate along the way, and they're great. They're good. They don't want any more stress in their lives. But despite that, you realize that there's a lot of opportunities out there to grow, and marketing is a fantastic way to identify and find those opportunities. So one of the things that we see is often many companies we look at will spend 1 or 2% of their revenue on marketing, whereas more optimized companies might find a really good ROI spending 15% of the revenue on marketing. So we try to find that happy balance of the most we can spend that drives really good results. And I think that's true in almost any industry we look at.
Yes. And do you apply any consistency across the businesses in terms of, well, we pay between X and Y for this particular thing? Or do you buy in bulk? I mean, you buy an expensive product.
Yes, we do. The really nice thing is, when you're, there's just kind of, quip about being famous where like, you get all these free things and life's so easy when you're famous, right? Like you get, free wedding cakes and wedding rings, right? Like, and being big, I just realized for the first time, this is the, with the companies, like one of the biggest things I've kind of built, and you just realize that the bigger you get, the easier things become in that sense. So, we get a lot of discounts and people competing for our business because we're so big, and that offers better payment terms and better access to materials and better pricing. And
and you apply the same sort of
so yes, we try to keep it consistent.
And I mean, there are parameters to what you buy, correct?
Exactly.
So, and you buy everything with some sort of parameter like that: computers, office supplies, leases,
everything. Absolutely.
So yeah, I think it's always interesting how people buy things and how I was having a conversation with a client today about how they were changing some of their purchasing decisions, and it was very interesting to me to hear why they were changing some of their purchasing decisions. And they were not after the least expensive; they were after the most value. And I think it's you either feel that way or you do not. And
No,
I
absolutely. And it goes back to, what type of business you're building. If you're building a business that's going to be around for 100 years, you don't want to be, be known for having things that don't have great quality out there. And whether that's a pencil or a, large expensive piece of equipment.
Yes, and you certainly don't want your AC breaking in the middle of the summer. So
Absolutely.
tell me, let's turn this conversation back around to cryptocurrency and blockchain, because I think that despite all the bumps that we've heard about, and there have been some interesting ones lately, we might still be in the wild west of blockchain and crypto, but to me, that is a lot of our future economy headed that way. How do you reconcile this sort of thing that lives in the ether world with all of the humans running around? And how are we going to integrate that?
Absolutely. It's really interesting, and I always kind of go back to comparing it to, sort of the next best alternative. And today you're looking at, banking systems where you have, 7 people in a room controlling kind of the fate of the economy, by being able to kind of, print money and things like that. And obviously that's kind of the Western world. And, my family for a while, we spent time living in places like Argentina and things like that. I mean, just, to explore the world. And you realize that there's, even bigger problems in markets like that, where if you can't trust the money, how do you, retire? How do you save? And I think that, the problems that, crypto has are many, and they are all people problems, right? It's people getting, greedy, or being unethical, or there being nebulous regulations. And I think that's, again, the history of kind of money and finance, overall, right? You've had, run on banking systems and Black Friday, and, like lots of just, terrible events. And, a lot of these happen very frequently, and they're all kind of intermingled. But I think, as some of these assets have more, gain more than a 10-year history, right? Bitcoin is, whatever, is 13 years old right now. I think when things get more of a history, when there's more kind of regulation understanding, I'm very pro regulation space. I think people are going to see the merits of having, digital money, and having, an open, transparent ecosystem in certain ways. So I think there's a lot of benefits that you'll start seeing once, some of these unregulated Wild West, items, you kind of fade away.
And I hear that a lot from people who live in the crypto space, that yes, we need some regulation. We need to be in the room when these conversations are happening, and we need some regulation to build some trust into the system. Which to me means it will be less Wild West and less Wild West. And like converting from gold or silver coin into dollars or whatever currency you have, that's more trust-based. Yet we can now verify the trust. I think those are pretty important things. And I think I don't want to say people don't understand it. I think it gets talked about enough. Maybe that's a better way.
I think that's exactly right. Unfortunately, a lot of the narrative that people see around, blockchain, at least in, common, in the main major media, is about, the profit opportunities and the price, not the fact that there's, tens of thousands of the smartest people in the world working on these solutions, these issues, with an aim of making people's lives better through, financial inclusion and financial transparency, and things like that.
I think that transparency is, I think there's more than one industry that could use some transparency, including mine. And I think that transparency brings fairness and a little bit more equity. Along with it, it just sometimes is a little bit bumpy to get there. Does that seem like a fair assessment?
Oh, absolutely. And there's a reason for that, which is there's a lot of, intermediaries out there in almost every space that, make a lot of money from the lack of transparency. And, I think just, thinking about really simple ones, it's like, okay, well, you buy a home and now you've got this like arcane arbitrary title insurance that everyone pays, thousands of dollars for. What does it have to? Well, you just got to prove that, whoever owns this thing really owns this thing, right? And every time you sell something, it's like, here's a few $1,000s, right? And, these are all, and it's okay, well, yeah, I want to go, sell a security or take something public. Well, okay, well, here's, the $500,000 you need to pay the lawyer and the $300,000 you need to pay out. Like these things like are just big pieces of the economy that are because you can't trust things, right? And so I think just reducing, increasing trust in the economy will actually, sure, it may hurt some intermediaries, but I think it'll, increase commerce and, increase overall wealth. Like that's kind of the hope, at least.
Yes, to me, that sounds like a very hopeful future.
Absolutely.
And I think we will leave it there for today. Thank you so much. I think people will get a lot out of this. And I think blockchain is definitely the way of the future. And I think blockchain, gold, and plumbing are a fascinating combination. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you are listening, thank you so much. If you enjoyed this episode, like it, leave us a review, subscribe. It really helps us spread the message, and we will see you next time. Thank you so much, everybody.